Welcome to Just Thinking. The town election is on May 21st, and to help you learn about the candidates, I will be interviewing each one that is running for a contested seat. I will ask the same questions of each candidate for an office, so we can compare and draw our own conclusions from their responses. These interviews run about 20 minutes each and can be found on Holliston Cable Access Facebook page and at www.hcattv.org, so you can watch anywhere at any time. And my next candidate is Ken Szajda, and Ken is running for re-election to the Finance Committee. Welcome.
Welcome, Mary.
Okay. So we'll just do the general information. How long have you lived here? Tell us a little about your professional background.
Well, I've been a Holliston resident since 2000, October of 2000, and professionally, I'm an electrical engineer by training. I'm basically a hyperlogical person in every aspect of what I do, and that's reflected in my engineering work. I'm a chip designer, which means I design integrated circuits, so most of the work that I do is microscopic, but everybody touches it at some point most of the time. So. And
do you still manage to work from home?
I work from home sometimes, but not all the time.
Oh.
I do some commuting now.
Oh, okay. How's the commute go?
It's terrible, and I want to work from home all the time.
Right. Exactly. So, all right. So how many terms have you been on the Finance Committee?
I believe this would be my 5th or 6th term. I was appointed before I was elected, so I'm always
a little
trying
fuzzy.
to remember. Yeah.
So why are you interested in this again?
I'm a glutton for punishment? No. The real reason is that when I joined the committee, I wanted to contribute to the town I lived in a way that I felt I could do best. Some people are good at planting flowers and trees. Being a scientist and an engineer, I felt that I could help out analytically with the town and manage the finances. Over the years, I've worked with many great committee members to put in place many good programs, and a lot of those are starting to get to the point where we're going to see a lot of the fruits of that labor, and so I'd really like to have the opportunity to see it all the way through.
Okay. When you talk about programs, just clarify what you mean. Within the Finance Committee?
Within the Finance Committee,
okay.
Yes.
All right. Describe the specific skills or experience that you bring to the board.
Well, as I said, I'm a highly analytical person, but really what I think distinguishes me from a lot of the other members of the Finance Committee is my technology background. Most people today consider themselves technologists because they own a smartphone. I consider myself a technologist because I design the chips that go into the smartphone. So when it comes to the town and you talk about towns like Holliston moving forward, a lot of what determines financial decision making is the technology that's being used and the technology that's being employed by the town. And so it's very important to have somebody, in my opinion, somebody like myself who understands the technology and isn't just looking at it from a numbers perspective.
I don't think I understand that. I need you to, what technology are you talking about?
Okay, well, let me give you an example.
Please
It occurred while I was on the committee. Years ago, when I joined the committee, the town had several file servers. Obviously, we have all sorts of records that are kept electronically. And backing those records up involved a tape, old tape drives,
sure.
That our old technology director used to literally bring home with him every night. He'd take one as a backup mechanism to have it off-site. He'd bring one home with him. He'd switch it out, so forth and so on, right? When that system came up for replacement several years ago, the initial request was replace the system with a new tape system, right? I looked at that and said, there are better technologies out there. We don't need to be using tapes anymore, and I pointed towards several different alternatives. And at first that created a little bit of a stir because people were like, why do we need to change? Some people were resistant to that. But over time, people came to see that I understood the industry very well and knew where things were going, and we ended up going with a much more modern system that eliminates the need for somebody to be walking around with a tape in their pocket.
Okay. And those kinds of things continue to arise?
Yes, they arise all the time.
Okay.
We deal with school budgets, for example. The schools are constantly looking at new technologies, and I'm not taking anything away from them. They have the skills to evaluate those as well. But from the financial aspect, when a matter like that comes to the Finance Committee, it's important that we have that expertise as well to understand the technology requests they're making and be able to determine whether they're financially valuable.
Got it. Got it. So all of the folks who are running for Finance Committee are experienced at being on the Finance Committee. And even though one of them is not currently a member, he was in the past. Okay. So what do you bring to this position that's different, that's unique?
Well, I think I just answered that question.
Okay.
Right? I mean, that's really, you know, I've had the pleasure of working with a bunch of really good people, talented across really diverse areas. But in all honesty, you know, I have a doctorate from MIT in electrical engineering, and the analytical skills that I have, and especially the scientific part of it, not the accounting part of it, I think is something that I definitely distinguishes me from most of the other members. Okay.
In your view, what are the top 3 most important functions of the Finance Committee?
Well, by far the top function is financial oversight. But in addition to that, I think it's also financial guidance. There are many things that would be my second priority, is financial guidance. There are lots of things that occur in a town where people may have a specific objective, but they may not be thinking about the financial implications of those objectives. So the Finance Committee, being the one body in town that really has the clear financial picture of the entirety of the town's finances. The Selectmen does as well, but obviously that's not their primary function. We have the ability to provide not just oversight, but advice and guidance to ensure that the town is getting the best values for their dollars spent. As far as the third function, I'd say it's more as a process of checks and balances. There are lots of things that go on in the town, the Selectmen being the executive authority, and I don't perceive of the Finance Committee in any way as being you know, they're the executive authority. Finance Committee has a specific statutorily defined role, but I do think that when it comes to certain decisions, having the ability of us to go to the Selectmen to come to us is of value to the town as well. So.
I'm going to digress for just a second and say, historically, years ago, the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen were willing to have their debate on town meeting floor, as opposed to what seems to be the current practice, which is let's not debate it on town meeting floor, but rather to iron everything out beforehand. Why is that?
In a lot of cases, that's really just to make for a more efficient town meeting. And in many cases, it's unusual that the Board of Selectmen has a vehement disagreement with the Finance Committee. In most cases, it's more of a meeting of the minds, where they want a specific objective, and we have a specific financial objective, and it's just a matter of merging those together. And rather than having that process take place on the floor of town meeting, we believe, and remember, everything we do prior to town meeting is an open session, so it's not like it's this backroom dealing, but having that work done ahead of time makes for a more efficient town meeting. Look, you and I both know town meeting can be very long, and it doesn't draw large crowds. And so from our perspective, everything we can do to be transparent before town meeting, to facilitate an efficient town meeting, to possibly allow for more people to attend is a good thing.
I think after all of the elections are over, and assuming that you are still on the Finance Committee, then I think I would like to have a conversation about that sometime in the future.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll be back to that one. What is the Finance Committee role in developing new programs, initiatives, and services for the town? Now, you started to touch on that when you were talking about, you know, it's not your role. You're there to provide guidance from a financial perspective. It's not your role to decide whether we need this program or that program. Is there anything else that goes into that when you're doing the guidance? Is it beyond financial?
Yes, it can be beyond financial. And let me be clear, right? We have departments that have specific functions, and they're responsible for developing or bringing forth the matters that they feel are most important to them. We don't try to tell the schools how to run the schools. We don't try to tell Sean how to run DPW. Mm-hmm. Where we get involved in new programs are things that result in financial benefits to the town. For example, because we have this unique view of seeing the entirety of the town's finances, there are many times when a department may come to us about an issue that they're not aware of, that we have a capability somewhere else in town. Financially, we look at that and say, we don't want to, you're requesting to spend money. Makes no sense to spend money when we have the maybe ability to do it for less money over here. So I wouldn't call those new initiatives, but that is, from our perspective, we're driving from my perspective, we're driving efficiency throughout the town. And I'll give you a concrete example of that. One of the requests you see on the warrant for this town meeting is for parking lot repairs at Placentino and Miller. $25,000. Well, one of the things when that request was made was we went to the schools and said, have you talked to Sean about paving? Maybe even if it's not necessarily him, the DPW doing it, they deal with paving all the time. They could hook them up with the right people, whatever, get the best value for the town. And at the time when they originally brought it up, they hadn't talked to the school, they hadn't talked to Sean yet, and now they're doing that. And that's because we kind of get involved and say it's a money thing for us, which is we don't want to spend the money if we don't have to, but also this is the way the town should be functioning. We should be leveraging the skills we have across the town.
Okay, all right. Looking ahead now over the next 3 years, assuming you're elected, what's the next top most important change or improvement or service you'd like to see happen?
Well, the most important thing that will happen in this town in the next 3 years, from a financial perspective, is the retirement of the debt. Yes.
Okay.
Now, so to me, that's an important part of what we have to do as a town going forward. We know that there are infrastructure needs. We hear that nationally, but within our town, we have issues with the library, and everybody knows where I stand on the library. I've been quoted on that many times.
To be clear, go ahead. Not everybody knows.
Okay.
So.
I think the current facility has historic value. I don't believe it has value as a library. I think there are structural, it's either going to require a large investment or a new library at some point. I'm just saying that we're reaching the point where the patchwork is kind of not working.
I think that's fair. Just let people know where you are.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
But anyway, so yes, the bond is going to be paid. These are all the bonds that we took on when we did the major repairs to schools, and we did a little bit of the sewer project that we did, and all those things. They're all coming together now, and all going away now.
Yes, and that's and what's important to remember about that is that is not recapturable funds. I think that's one of the common misperceptions that people have is that, okay, bonds expire. Oh, now we've got all this money we were paying for the bonds, we can spend elsewhere, and that's really not the case. Those were debt exclusions. So the reason that I think most people should be excited about it is because they're going to see the tax rate come down when those bonds expire.
You want to explain that?
Oh, okay.
The average person does not speak this language.
My apologies. My apologies.
We didn't do an override.
We did not do an override. Well, we did a debt exclusion. And what that basically means is, from the town's perspective, back in those days, we voted to temporarily raise our taxes to pay the debt associated with that bond. When the bond is paid off, the tax collection associated with that bond goes away, and that results in a reduction in the tax rate. And for anybody who's old enough, that was the way the Mass Turnpike was supposed to be funded until they decided to reauthorize many more bonds into the future. Eventually, the original plan was that there would be no tolls on the pike after the original bonds were paid off. But unlike what is now Mass DOT, we don't have the option to just continue extending our bonds indefinitely.
And to further clarify, if we had done those as overrides, all of that cost would have been built into.
Correct. That's the reason you do debt exclusions versus overrides. You pay for what your debt is bonded for, what you're buying exactly, and then it goes away.
Yep. So. Okay. So does the Finance Committee already have conversations going on about what that changes, this one-time, whatever adjustment?
Well, it doesn't change all that much from the town's financial perspective. It's really the taxpayers that benefit because, again, the money goes away.
Right.
We don't see any change to our budget, ours meaning the town's budget, in any meaningful way. What we do see is that the tax rate, which is now 18-something, will come down probably. I don't know, and I don't want to be quoted on this, but probably
don't promise
probably
anything.
by a non-trivial amount.
But I guess maybe I need to be clear on this then. Now, there is some sum of money that's in this year's budget that won't be in some future year's budget. Is that so nominal that it's really not?
No, it's the amount we pay for the debt is non-trivial, but it's all excluded. That's the thing. So when you look at the debt budget, you see a piece in there, but that represents the piece we're paying off with the taxes now.
Okay.
So that's why I said when that goes away,
it's gone.
The debt budget comes down, but our tax revenue goes down by an approximately, basically an equal amount.
Gotcha.
So.
Gotcha. Okay. So in the meantime, then, you have a lot of people that you're trying to explain this to, perhaps?
Well, I think
because there does seem to be an impression,
yes,
at least in some corners.
Well, there are two ways of dealing with that retirement, right? There are some people that believe that that frees up more money for operating expenses, which it really doesn't do, as I just explained. There are others that understand that, but look at it as an opportunity to borrow more. You know, kind of like someone who leases a car. Yeah, right. It's like leasing a car, where you say, okay, I've leased, my 3-year lease is up, so now let me trade, get a new car, and lease for 3 more years. Philosophically, I don't believe in debt for debt's sake, so I don't look at retirement of debt as an opportunity to take on more. I think that one of the things the town needs to do is manage its debt better, and we don't have time to go into that today, but I'll say that if I get reelected, I'll say that for a future conversation.
Okay. So what is your personal vision for what Holliston should look like, feel like in the next 5 to 10 years? Well,
Holliston fundamentally, I believe, from what I understand in talking to people, wants to be a bedroom community. But people also don't want to pay high taxes, right? That's natural. Who would? So we have the Economic Development Committee, and we focus on economic development. If I look down the road 5 to 10 years in Holliston, what I would hope is that we have the right balance between economic development, the right type of economic development, but keeping the town kind of in its sleepy residential nature, because I think that's why people move here. If you wanted the Natick Mall in Holliston, you'd move to Natick. So I think that's what I see. I see a town with hopefully, a lot of recreational activities. I'm a big supporter, as many people know, of the whole rail trail project in terms of the 8-arch bridge and all that, the restoration. I think Holliston is unique in one sense, and that is we are close enough to Boston that people don't feel that it's a horrible commute. It's not great, but it's a reasonable commute. We have good schools, but we're also very country-like. Which is hard to find this close to Boston.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Speaking of the schools, a lot of people believe that the reason people move here is because of the schools. Do you subscribe to that?
I believe that the schools definitely, in any town, the schools are definitely a factor, especially for families that either have kids or are planning to have children, right? I know plenty of people in my life who lived in places like Boston and Cambridge, and when their kids were becoming school age, they moved out to the suburbs just to go to a town with a better school system. So it definitely impacts the property values. But fundamentally, everything from the financial side is about sustainability. And so there are some that say we spend everything we can on the schools. There are some who say schools get too much money, we should hold them to the same standards as everybody else. If you look over the years, the schools have always fallen in between those extremes, and I think that's the right place. When you don't have the pushback, you don't get, in general, and this is not unique to schools, but just anybody, you don't have that pushback, you don't get the deeper thought that needs to go into preparing a budget. So I think it's very important, the process every year that we have with the school committee is a very friendly one, but also a creative tension one, where they want to come to us and say, here's the long list of things we want, and we go to them and say, here's where we are, and then let's talk about how we come to a meeting of the minds, as you referenced earlier with the selectmen, right? I think that if we sat there as a rubber stamp for what they wanted, there wouldn't be as much thought into that, in the same way that if we were rigid in holding on to our position and not willing to listen to what they had to say, we'd probably have worse schools. So I think we have good creative tension there.
Creative tension, I like that. What are you most proud of from your tenure on the board?
Well, I thought about that question a lot because there are lots of things that I'm proud of being a part of on the Finance Committee. If I had to pick one thing, I would say it's the OPEB trust. And the reason for that, I thought about things like getting rid of the trash fee, things like that. But that might be more politically favorable. But the OPEB trust, to me, it represents a significant accomplishment that demonstrates Holliston's leadership in the financial area. We had, as you know, nationwide, there's this whole crisis over pension and benefit funding. And for those of you at home who may not know what OPEB is, that's other post-employment benefits, which is basically benefit funding for retirees and things like that. When it comes to funding those, it's not an easy thing to do. You have to put money aside that could be used for other things. But at the same time, these are not benefits you can choose not to fund. These are already earned benefits that people have earned as employees of the town. So there are some people who look at that and see the problem and say, it's too big a problem, we just will do nothing, somebody will have to come bail us out. In Holliston, we looked at the problem and we formulated a solution. We looked at the remedies available to the town. We did not find those satisfactory, partly because one of the reasons towns are in this situation is because of taking the easy way out that the state provides. So in that particular case, we crafted special legislation, shepherded it all the way through till then Governor Deval Patrick signed our OPEB trust into law, which separates us from the state law, which is a good thing. We funded it, and we've kept that funding commitment year after year, and next week we'll be hopefully continuing that funding. And the last report we got was that we were in the top 97th percentile, roughly, of towns in the Commonwealth on this funding liability. I look at us as we should be leaders, not followers. So some people look at it and say, this is a sign that we could do less. And I say, no, it's a sign that we are that much further ahead of the rest of the state. And when push comes to shove, when these liabilities start catching up with cities and towns, we'll be the one town in a position to say we address this over a 20-year period, and we're better off than most towns.
And the people who have worked here will be grateful.
Yes.
What's your biggest regret? Anything you want to do over?
Well, that's a loaded question. And the Finance Committee, no. The rest of my life, I have plenty of regrets. But no, and being on the committee involves a lot of give and take, involves a lot of negotiation, and sometimes that's not easy. Sometimes people get rubbed the wrong way. Sometimes, but in the end, I don't regret any of it because I look at where we are now, and we're in a much better financial position than we were. And again, I'm not trying to take credit for it. There are many, many people I've worked with over the years.
It's a 7-person board.
Right, it's a 7-person board. But when I look back at where things were the day I walked onto the Finance Committee and where we are now, going into town meeting next Monday, we are light years ahead. We had a list of priorities. We've addressed most of them. We still have more to do. But I think that financially, the town of Holliston is in, again, operating-wise, you're fundamentally constrained by Prop 2.5. But I think overall, financially, we're now getting down to the second and third order things that we need to do, and that's a good place to be. So.
Okay, you now get a little bit of time to do your pitch. You get to say, why should I be voting for you, Mr. Szajda?
Well, I have 2 things I'd want to say, right? First of all is, if the town chooses that they decide, I look at what I've done and I say, at this point, most voters have seen me on the ballot before, have seen me at town meeting. They know my style. They've seen my presentations. I've always tried to do my job using logic and removing the emotion, because I think that that's the most effective way to do it. It's not saying you're heartless, but what I mean is that I'm after one thing, which is to adequately represent the taxpayers of this town and ensure that their dollars are being wisely spent. So I hope that the town supports me, and I hope that the job I've done speaks for itself, and that the townspeople continue to support me in my position. If not, then the joke I always say to people is, if not, then I just go back to having a lot more free time. So.
Okay. All right, well then on that note, I'll wish you good luck. And I will say, now that the candidates have shared their views, please be sure to do your part and vote on May 21st at the high school field house between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. Turnout for the town election in 2017 was just 11%. That's 1,100 voters. And in 2018, it was 16%. We'd like to beat that this year and hit 20% or more. Come on. There are also 2 questions on the ballot about retail marijuana to bring town bylaws into line with the latest state regulations. Local government hits you at home and is where you have the biggest influence. And Holliston is the living model of true democracy. Please participate. Thank you very much.